I always liked early rides. The air is cold, clear, it almost stings your lungs. The roads are empty, and it feels like the world hasn't woken up yet, and you're the only one seeing it for real, without its makeup. Everything is possible. My bike isn't just a machine. It's more than metal, rubber, and gasoline. It's a way to escape the noise. And I don't just mean the roar of traffic or the clamor of the big city. I mean the noise inside my own head. Those constant thoughts, to-do lists, anxieties, regrets. When you're on two wheels, all of that disappears. All that's left is the road, the wind, and the low, vibrating hum of the engine. When you ride alone long enough, you start noticing the little things. How the sound of the motor changes when you ride out from under a bridge. How the sun breaks through the morning clouds, painting the asphalt in strange colors. How shadows move differently when no one's around to scare them. They stretch out toward you, long and distorted in the dawn light, as if they want to touch you. And sometimes, you start thinking things you probably shouldn't. About how thin the line is between reality and what we imagine. About how easy it would be to just disappear, to take a wrong turn onto a road that isn't on the map, and just ride. Ride until you run out of gas and see what happens next. That morning, I wasn't planning anything special. Just a short trip to the woods. An hour or two of the quiet hunt. That's what I call mushroom hunting. It's my own kind of meditation. You, the forest, and a simple, clear goal to find something hidden under the blanket of fallen leaves. That's all. I'd been to this forest dozens of times. Old pines, that's what the locals called it. Though none of them ever set foot in here. They always told stories, strange stories, about people who went in for berries and came back. Different, silent, with empty, glassy-eyed stares. Or they didn't come back at all. I always dismissed it as common village folklore. Fantasies made up to keep kids away from dangerous swamps and old trees. I never believed them, but now, when I replay that day in my head over and over, I should have turned back. Turned back the very moment I saw the fog. It didn't just appear. It seemed to seep out from under the ground. Thick, pale, milky. It didn't swirl like normal fog. It hung still in the air, like a vast, ancient cobweb filling all the space between the trees. Too thick for that time of day, too still. It had a smell, not of dampness, but of something else. Old dust, emptiness. I rode into it, and my headlight barely pierced the veil. And the deeper I went, the quieter it got. That was the first thing that truly put me on edge. No birds, no insects, no rustling wind in the treetops. The forest, usually full of life, had frozen. It was as if it was holding its breath. All that was left was the muffled, underwater-like hum of my engine and my own accelerated, loud breathing inside the helmet. I glanced at the GPS mounted on the handlebars. It had stopped updating. The arrow representing me was just frozen at the entrance to the forest, back on the highway, as if I'd never gone any further. Satellite signal lost. I shrugged. A trifle. Old forest, dense canopy. It happens. Besides, I knew the way by heart. At least I thought I did. The old forest road, the fallen birch tree, the small clearing by the stream. I could ride this path with my eyes closed. Only, the trail didn't look the same. It was as if the forest had rearranged itself overnight. Like someone had moved the scenery. The trees stood closer together. Their roots seemed to burst from the ground more aggressively than I remembered, as if trying to grab my wheels. The light was strange. Not like morning, but somehow old, faded. The fallen birch. It was always on the right side of the trail. Always. I remember this distinctly because I always had to ride around it on the left, where the ground was firmer. And now it was on the left. I stopped for a moment, looked at it. A huge white trunk, wet from the fog. Maybe I just forgot? Got it mixed up. Memory is an unreliable thing. My brain was playing games with me. When I finally parked in the familiar clearing, everything seemed to snap back to normal. The fog suddenly dissipated. It didn't drift away. It retreated, in seconds, as if it had never been there. The air once again smelled of pine and damp earth. I even let out a quiet laugh at myself. That's it, buddy. You're getting paranoid. Listen to too many old tales. I took off my helmet, hung it on the handlebar. The silence that fell after I killed the engine was almost deafening. But now it was natural, healthy. I grabbed my basket and my favorite knife and walked deeper in. You know that feeling when you spot the first mushroom, half hidden under the moss? That small, pure joy, like a kid finding treasure. It's a grounding feeling. It brings you back to the moment. I found a few chanterelles, bright yellow like spilled gold against the dark earth. Then, a perfect, firm sep. The cap was taut, the stem clean. The sounds of the forest began to return. The distant tapping of a woodpecker, the rustle of a squirrel somewhere in the canopy. Everything was okay. Or at least the forest really wanted me to think so. I wandered for about half an hour, moving deeper and deeper away from the clearing. The basket was already a third full. I was completely focused, looking only at the ground. And that's when I started to hear something. At first, I thought it was just an echo, my own footsteps, bouncing off the dense trees. But the sound, it was mimicking my actions, with a delay. When I stopped, there was silence. When I took a step on the dry leaves, a second later, the same quiet crunch sounded behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just the dense undergrowth. A wall of ferns and young trees. I stood motionless, listening. Silence. Only that same woodpecker somewhere far away. I took 3 more steps, slowly, deliberately loud. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And immediately behind me, from somewhere in that same undergrowth. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I turned again, faster this time. No one. But the sound came again, now from the direction I had just been looking. As if it had circled me in the second I had my back turned. There's this strange kind of fear that doesn't make you scream. It makes you listen harder. It makes the air thick and every sound dangerous. I decided to hide. Just a ridiculous, childish idea. I quickly and quietly slipped behind the trunk of a huge, ancient oak and froze, holding my breath. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. Absolute silence. I was already starting to feel like an idiot. And then I heard the footsteps. They weren't looking for me. They were following my trail exactly. They walked up to the spot where I had been standing a second ago. And stopped. I heard breathing. Or was it the wind in the branches? No, it was breathing. Deep calm. Rhythmic. It was 10 feet away from me, on the other side of the tree. My heart was beating so loudly it felt like the whole forest could hear it. It was hammering against my ribs, up into my throat. I couldn't stand it. I had to look. I slowly peered out from behind the trunk. No one. Absolutely no one. And in that same instant, the crunch of branches came from 20 yards away, to my left. As if it had moved instantly, silently. I decided to head for the stream. I always loved that spot. There's something calming about running water. It washes away anxiety. It's always moving, always alive. But when I reached the bank, the sound of the water was wrong. More precisely, there was no sound. The stream was moving, yes, but it wasn't gurgling. The water looked thick, dark, almost black, and quiet. It flowed without a sound, like motor oil. There was no sunlight glinting off the water, even though the sky above was clear. I crouched down to get a closer look, and leaned over the water to touch it. And for a second, I saw my reflection. It was looking up at me, and my reflection blinked. But I hadn't blinked. I was sure of it. I recoiled so fast I hit my shoulder on a root sticking out of the bank. Pain shot through my arm. I rubbed my eyes, looked at the water again. Now it was just dark. My reflection was gone, completely, as if I wasn't looking at water, but at a piece of black velvet. The water rippled from my movement, and then it was perfectly still again, silent. And just then, as I was getting up, I noticed something beside me, on the damp sand right at the water's edge. A print, fresh. The water hadn't filled it yet, but not mine. My boot had a clear, aggressive tread. This print was a bare foot, huge, much larger than my size 10. It was pressed impossibly deep into the mud, as if by something incredibly heavy. And the toes? There were 6 of them, and they were too long, pointed. I remembered that a little deeper in the forest, past the stream, there was an old hunting cabin. I'd never been inside. I always steered clear of it. It had a feeling of decay, something unpleasant. But right then I just needed walls, shelter, a place to catch my breath, lock a door behind me, and think. I ran, without looking back. The door was open, not just ajar, but torn off one hinge and hanging crookedly. I stopped at the threshold. Inside, dust. A thick layer of dust on everything. Broken furniture, an overturned table, a single chair. The smell of old smoke, mold, and something else. Swedish, like rotting meat. Someone had been here, and been here recently. On the dust-covered table sat an open, rusty can of food. But the dust around it was undisturbed, as if it had been placed there and then time had stopped. I stepped inside, heart pounding. On the wall, in the dim light, there were carvings. Tally marks. Hundreds of them. They were everywhere. Grouped not in fives like people usually do, but in sevens. Dozens of groups of 7 marks. I ran my finger over one. A deep scratch. What were they counting? Weeks? And below them, near the floor, a single word was scratched deep, as if with a nail or a broken knife. Stay. I should have left. I should have run from there, non-stop, straight to my motorcycle. But instead, I whispered into the thick, heavy darkness of the room. Stay where? And that's when something answered, not with a voice, from under the floor. It was a quiet, slow sound, a scraping, like something heavy and wet being dragged across the dirt. Then a knock, slow, deliberate, on the wood directly beneath my feet. 1. A long, heavy pause. 2. A pause that lasted an eternity. 3. I froze. The air became electric, thick, like the moment before a thunderclap. I started to back away slowly toward the door, and the old, rotten floorboard creaked under my boot. The knocking stopped. Silence fell. Absolute, suffocating, vacuum-like silence. Then I heard it, breathing, not mine, beneath me. It was deep, raspy, and it was trying to mimic me. I instinctively held my breath, and the breathing under the floor stopped too. I stood there, not breathing, until my lungs started to burn. I exhaled, slowly, quietly, and it exhaled with me. The same rhythm, the same rasp. I didn't think, I just bolted. I burst out the door into the trees. Branches whipped my face, tore at my jacket. The basket of mushrooms fell somewhere behind me. I didn't care. The forest was darker now. It shouldn't have been, it was still midday. The sun should have been high, but everything looked wrong, twisted. The tree trunks were bent at strange angles I didn't remember. I tried to find the path I'd come in on, but every direction looked the same. The trees, they weren't in the same places. They were closer. They were closing in around me. And then I heard it again. Footsteps, but not quiet this time. Loud, heavy, slow, deliberate. They were following me. I ran faster, but no matter how fast I ran, the sound stayed the same distance, right behind my back. When I finally saw the clearing, I stopped. My heart fell into my stomach. The clearing was empty. The motorcycle was gone. No, 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 no. This is impossible. I left it right here, right next to this big rock. I remember. I ran forward. The ground was covered in a thick, damp layer of last year's leaves. No tire tracks, no boot prints of my own. It was as if I had never been here. This is impossible. This just isn't possible. I turned around. The forest stood like a wall, dense, dark, and now, identical in every direction. The path I'd ridden in on was gone. Panic began to rise from deep inside me, cold and sticky. It was suffocating. I lunged in the direction where I remembered the road should be. I ran for 5 minutes, crashing through thorny bushes, ignoring the branches scratching my face, and burst out into the same clearing. I tried again, a different direction, slower this time, more carefully. I ran until I was gasping, my lungs on fire, and once again I ended up in the same damned clearing. The forest was playing with me. It had looped me. It had locked me in. I fell to my knees. I pulled out my phone. Of course, the phone. No service. I expected that. GPS. I tried to open the map. The app froze. The map wouldn't load. Just a black screen with a flashing dot. My dot. And then the screen flickered and came on. But it wasn't the GPS. It was the camera. The front-facing camera. I was staring at my own dirty, terrified face on the black screen. And in the reflection on the phone screen, right over my shoulder, It was standing there, tall, thin, like the trunk of a young tree, but completely black, and it was slowly tilting its head to the side, as if it was curious. I didn't turn around, couldn't. I just stared at the screen, paralyzed. And then I heard it, not from the cabin, not from under the ground, but in the air, a sharp, loud knock on wood, directly behind my back. 1, 2, 3. I realized the forest didn't want me to leave. It was just waiting for me to stop being a visitor and become a part of it. What happened next? What I saw when I finally found the courage to turn around, that story isn't over.